I'm a big proponent of digital currencies. I'm a long-time investor in Bitcoin. The advent of stablecoins and the regulatory acceptance and promotion of these is such an important change for the industry. We see that the settlement process for Visa payments can be significantly improved using digital currency stablecoins.
Welcome to the Issuer Academy, Paymentology's podcast to innovate, scale, and provide impact. I'm your host, Merusha Naidu. If you're a fintech professional, banking leader, or an innovator in the digital payment space, you're in the right place. Here, we deep dive into the challenges and triumphs of launching next-generation card programs, from virtual cards and digital wallets to cross-border FX solutions. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Issuer Academy. I'm your host, Merusha Naidu, and today we're talking about one of the most dynamic regions in global finance. We recently ran a poll on our Issuer Academy LinkedIn page, and the results were clear. 71% of people who voted believe the MENA region will lead the next wave of digital innovation. Unsurprisingly, when just last month, the UAE overtook the UK in global fintech rankings. So here with me to explore the drivers of product evolution in MENA and how partnership between global networks and agile processes are shaping the next generation of financial services. Firstly, we have Godfrey Sullivan, SVP of Products and Solutions at Visa CEMEA. Welcome, Godfrey.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to be here.
And then we have our very own Jeff Harker, CEO of Paymentology.
Okay.
Let's get right into it. What makes MENA different? Before we dive into the deep end, let's start with something a little bit lighter. You've both worked across multiple regions and multiple markets. So tell us, what's one thing about MENA that makes it a dream to build in, and one thing that makes it a real challenge? Godfrey, we'll start with you.
Very good. So I've been working across the MENA region probably for about 20 years or so. And summarizing it in one thing is tricky. Maybe there's three. There's like incredible ambition of the leadership of these countries, like breathtaking ambition. They have the financial resources to also deliver on that ambition. And there's just so much opportunity. These markets are at relatively early stages of the evolution. And so the potential is enormous, which makes it, as you say, a dream area to work in.
And what's one of the real challenges?
I think a big challenge is the cultural diversity. So within the MENA region, you'll have like a Morocco or a Sudan. So even in these little areas, there's massive cultural diversity. And there's lots of people who come to that part of the world. But the decision makers really value the trust and intimacy of, are you there for the long term? Do you have this kind of longer term commitment? And once you build that trust, it's incredibly resilient. But it can be a challenge to establish that in the beginning.
And to break into it, right? Because relationships are key. And Jeff, what's your perspective?
Look, I think Godfrey kind of touched on it as well. I think for me, it's the fact that they have the ambition in the first place, which makes it super exciting. I used to work in the US a lot, and it somewhat feels like the early days of Silicon Valley in terms of you would go to the region, you would have a conversation, you'd tell them about your harebrained idea. And in many places around the world, people find faults as to why that won't work. In Silicon Valley, it was always about, okay, well, that might not work, but this is how we can make it work. And it feels a little bit like in the Middle East that's the same type of thing. There's a desire to make things happen. And structurally, I think it's also designed. I think regulators are being friendly towards it. There's an element of playing catch up. I think there's an ego part into this as well. They want to be seen to be winning and to be taking advantage. And I think all of those, I guess, ingredients together are creating this amazing opportunity at the moment, this amazing environment. And when you couple that with probably a population which has been without a number of these digital kind of banking services, there's a big population to address. So I think that's what makes it a dream. I think the challenge is almost related to that in that they want to move so quickly. And my old mentor used to talk to me about sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. And I think sometimes there's an energy and a desire to move so quickly that sometimes there's not always enough thought potentially that goes into. I think there's a few 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But in terms of an energy in the region and a place to do business, I don't think there's many places I'd rather be at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at it, I think I read a quote saying CEMEA is now the third wave of innovation. We had the US, then we saw Singapore, then we saw the UK and Europe, and now CEMEA really is that hotbed of innovation and excitement. And, and that's really what we're here to talk about today. So thank you both for that. Now let's take a look at digital banks and card innovation. Across MENA, we're seeing a wave of digital-only banks entering the market, designing products from the ground up without those legacy constraints. For example, in Saudi, we've seen D360, who signed up over 600,000 customers within the first 2 months of launch, which is just incredible. So, Godfrey, when you look at these digital-first banks across the regions, what types of Visa products are really resonating most with these new customers?
So as we think about financial services, products, and our customers, um, everyone's got like super busy lives. Everyone's like doing so much stuff. They have like such complexity in their lives, and they crave simplicity, and particularly from financial products and financial institutions. And I think what we have seen is the most successful products and offerings to be launched, and something that we work on very hard in Visa to aspire towards is simplicity of these products and offerings. You see this with the D360 guys. You know this very well from working with WEO, which I was privileged to be involved in at its early stages, and it just makes banking and payments super, super simple. And so those are real shining lights of what we should be aiming towards. In Visa, we have that aspiration very much from an e-com perspective. We're still asking customers to enter in 16-digit PAN numbers to do e-com transactions. People, there's so much hassle. We can get so much better at that. So we've got a big push at the moment around click to pay and the Visa payment pass keys. So you can just use your biometric authentication on your device to authenticate your e-com transactions. And so we envision by 2030, we're not going to be using PANs for e-com, which is a big driver. And again, going back to making things really simple. The other aspect that we've done a lot of work on is around our benefits. So it's the 7th most valuable brand in the world. You have like your Visa credential. Like, how do you know what benefits you get from it? They've got like all these benefits. Is there a single location where you can go for that? One of the big benefits is around lounge access at the airports. And again, until recently, you had to show your plastic card and to get into the lounge. And we said, look, we don't need that anymore. So now we have our airport companion app. So it's a digital experience to get access to the lounge. But now we can build all of the related benefits so that people can understand the product through a single digital interface. Over the last 9 months or so, we've got 3 million users of the airport companion app. Which is phenomenal. It's like an incredible startup just within the kind of the CEMEA region. And again, it's about bringing this simplicity to the payments related experiences and financial services, which I think is a real driving force.
Absolutely, especially when you look at the penetration of smartphones in the GCC and CEMEA as a whole, 97%. That is absolutely incredible, especially, when we look at how the UAE and markets like Saudi have really transformed digital payments. Customers are really looking at, okay, we have the digital tool. Now it's about making things simple, easy access. How do I remove the thinking required to get access to my benefits? And that's really what we should be doing. We should be looking at customers' needs even before they think about it themselves. So it's absolutely key. Thank you so much for that. Jeff, from Paymentology side, how do you help these players launch issuing programs quickly, but then carry on that partnership effectively?
I think it's a continuation of what Godfrey said. It's around, I guess, simplicity. I mean, the Paymentology business is really, we see ourselves as an enabling business that sits behind. We're part of the infrastructure which these new banks and fintechs use to provide kind of their unique value enhancing kind of user experiences. So we think that it's important that we make that as simple as possible. So we're an API first, cloud first business. We try and create multiple different ways to connect with our business, which match how the customer wants to deal with it. So we start with the APIs. We then move to kind of SDKs. We've got micro front end services, and in some instances we have, I guess, white labeled mobile wallets. And so depending on where a customer wants to connect, we try and make that as easy as possible for them. And the easier we can make that, then the quicker that they launch. We effectively see ourselves as a toolkit, or a menu, I guess, that the client can take various components of that toolkit, and then deciding on what part of the customer experience or what part of the product they have the expertise in, they can leverage those different components. And then we wrap around that. I think one of the things that we value in Paymentology is that sometimes a technology business can focus too much on the technology. And I know that sounds a bit strange, but ultimately we're a B2B business and we have enterprise sales, and there's still a people-to-people relationship. So we actually have employees in over 60 countries that are on the ground. They have local knowledge about the market. They have local knowledge about payments. And so through that implementation process, but importantly, post that implementation, once they're live, we like to continue to hold a very close relationship with that. And as it moves from implementation to, I would call it, insight-driven, we try and look at the data we use with that customer. We try and tell them how they should view that data, whether there's insights that they can take to think about how they deliver services differently to customers. And I would actually say that post go live piece is arguably more important because it's a multi-year relationship, and we want to be seen to helping our customers succeed. Our business model is very successful. Very easy, sorry. If a customer is successful, we're successful. So it's kind of a very aligned in terms of our interests.
Absolutely. So it's about, really, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's about optionality, giving customers the option of saying, we have lots of different technology, but choose what works best for you, right? But at the same time, using data to say, okay, let's take D360 or Wheel, looking at their data to say, how are their customers evolving? What product comes next? Where are their customers growing to? What are the needs of those customers? I think that's really where both Paymentology and Visa are working really well together, because we're both asking the right questions, right? What's next? What is the next wave of innovation? And that's what really makes it so exciting. And another key topic which we really want to focus on is cross-border payments and everyday use cases, because we're seeing a lot of that come through in CEMEA, where either you have a lot of remittances going across Africa or out of the GCC into other markets. So when we look at it, remittances are playing a part in daily life here in CEMEA. Just this summer, ADIB and Visa launched Remit, giving UAE customers instant access to over 11 billion endpoints worldwide. That is phenomenal, firstly. Godfrey, what does it say about where cross-border payments or cross-border money movement is heading in MENA?
So firstly, we're very proud of our relationship with Adib. I think that's it's a phenomenal product that we're launching with them. When you look at remittances in the MENA region, particularly the GCC, it's such a large market. These are some of the largest remittance markets in the world. And I think from a Visa perspective, there's also, it requires a degree of thoughtfulness around how do you play. So many of these banks have established bilateral relationships with banks in the Philippines or Pakistan or India, and those relationships, are very low cost for the banks and for the end customers. However, there's also complexity in managing those relationships, and I think where Visa comes in, and Visa Direct particularly, is for those financial institutions which are perhaps not large enough to establish independent bilateral relationships with other banks in these destination countries, or the long tail of countries that people need to send money to. It's not only India and the Philippines, and that's where Visa as a network, and this is our thing. This is our core competence. We connect to like 15,000 banks, and as a network, we can make it very easy for those banks which perhaps don't have the capabilities to manage their own bilateral relationships with other banks, which is a big headache, and for those long tail countries where there are significant remittance volumes, and this is where the Visa Direct product really comes into its own. And I think that's going to be an important part of the evolution of the remittance markets in the region. The other dynamic that we're seeing, we can talk about this later maybe, in parts of Africa, is the use of stablecoins for these cross-border transactions, an area that we're really focusing on. I'm sure we'll talk about and touch on that later in the discussion.
Absolutely. I think when you look at remittance, it's so interesting. I think the stat was it'll be over 3.45 billion in remittances across CEMEA by the end of 2026, which is absolutely incredible. And when we look at products like Visa Direct, I think Visa's taken such an interesting approach because you really are using existing rails to enable basically every country globally, right? Whether it's me to me, so topping up my own account, domestic P2P or cross-border. It's really making remittances borderless, which is, something that I think customers have been asking for decades, right? Jeff, what kinds of product features are banks and fintechs asking you for when they want to serve either expats or SMEs who really depend on these daily transfers?
Look, it's a great question. Actually, it's an area which is close to my heart. I used to be involved in many remittances businesses, and I think Godfrey touched on a few important parts of it. With remittance, if you think about the journey that's come on, I think historically there was a lot that was cash was involved at one side or another. There was a bank account at one side or another, and the complexities of doing that, as Godfrey says, is often hard and expensive because there's physical cash and there's different use cases. So there's consumer use cases, there's corporate use cases, and I think often what people forget in remittance is that it's actually very different to whether you're the sender or the receiver. I think what Visa have done an amazing job with Visa Direct is actually pull a lot of that almost together under a single kind of banner. And so whether it's account to account, card to account, account to card, whether it's corporate, whether it's consumer, Visa is trying to actually enable a single user to be able to manage the complexity around all of those different pieces together. And it is very hard when you add on top of that 180, 200 countries of which you're trying to kind of manage between as well. So with that context, one, I think the Visa Direct product is amazing, one that we're very excited at Paymentology to be integrating into shortly. But from a Paymentology perspective, our customers are really looking at how do they manage multi-currency, and how can we help them do that multi-currency? How do we give them certainty around FX rates? FX margins, FX rates are one of the hidden kind of wonders of the world still in terms of charges, etc. And our kind of mission and is to create transparency for that and enable people to be able to do that in a cost-effective way as possible, recognizing that there is a cost, I guess, to build that to build that ecosystem. And then how do we, I guess, package that and deliver that in a user experience which is useful. And I think one of the great things which people often don't understand about remittance and cards is the fact that you can use the card to be one end of that transaction. So if you're sending to someone, we can issue an instant issue virtual card to that consumer to be able to receive in real time. It means they don't have to go and physically pull up that cash. It's actually much more secure than not having to carry cash around and vice versa. And I think actually it's one of the really good examples of the power of the partnership between Visa and Paymentology. So I'm actually really excited about remittance. I think there's a lot of work we've done, but I think over the next 2, 3, 4 years, I think there's a lot more we can do to give seamless experiences to customers.
Absolutely. And by Paymentology partnering with Visa, you're really opening up all of those different markets. Look, there's some really good players who do operate in the Philippines, Mexico, India, Pakistan, all of those kinds of countries. But the reality is they don't have full coverage. This really provides full global coverage and gives customers, again, that optionality.
It's exciting as well because this is one of the entry points, I think, when you think about people that are unbanked, and I think there's probably 50% of the people in the region are unbanked. Their first product or their first venture into a digital product is often driven by remittance. It's how do I start to move that money? So it's a really good, it's an area that we should continue to focus on because it's just huge.
And actually, you touch on a very good point, which is our next topic, which is financial inclusion, right? So for millions across CEMEA, the very first step, like you've just said, into the digital economy isn't a traditional bank account. It is a prepaid card, a youth debit card, or in many cases, a mobile wallet. With half of the adults across the region still unbanked, many remain credit invisible. That's why we've seen such a strong growth with BNPL and new forms of credit cards, linked to also alternative data, because many people still can't get a credit score, especially across Africa. It's still, in some markets, highly unheard of. Godfrey, what role do you see these gateway products playing in closing that inclusion gap across MENA? And how is Visa enabling new credit models across the region?
So firstly, it's incredibly important for Visa, and something which I think, if you look back over the last 20 years or so, we probably haven't done enough of it. And so what you have seen in some of these big markets is either the government stepping in to support financial inclusion, or sometimes private sector players, whether it's the mobile wallets or other wallets. Kazakhstan and Kaspi is a good example, and so there is an opportunity, and other players are filling that gap. And so what's imperative from a Visa point of view is a little bit more focused on that. And one of the things that we're particularly proud of, as we have a more intense focus on that, is the financial inclusion card, which we have recently launched in Pakistan with Mizan Bank, aimed exactly at that base of young students who are starting off in life. They don't have a financial product, and they need a very simple payments product that we're enabling for them, with a proposition, very low cost proposition, but tailored to that of students. We've got a program to roll that out across multiple markets, to make it an easy stepping on process to understanding about payments and making payments, and then growing from there. We're also very keen, and Jeff, we should probably talk about this afterwards, around how we can work with some of the wallets to enable credit for declines. So we have partnerships with wallets. They have payment credentials, but they're very often prepaid, and sometimes there's declines associated with that. But sometimes people have the money, and having a credit product, which is the first stepping stone, it's only a couple of dollars to say, all right, this is a transaction which has failed because I don't have sufficient funds. I can cover this with $2, $5, $10 as a stepping stone to building up a credit view for them. And working with partners such as yourself across some of these big wallets is super interesting for us. So yeah, incredibly important.
Absolutely. Firstly, I love your inclusion product. It's so important to build up that financial literacy while still, like you said, create that stepping stone for customers. But another very key point, and I think you alluded to it, is looking at those really microfinanced solutions to really help increase approval rates so you have a happier customer. But at the same time, it's really about teaching customers about how to use credit. And so again, it all kind of builds a story and a narrative around how do you really create financial inclusion across the board. So it's fantastic. Jeff, from your side, how is Paymentology's tech supporting these new credit products? And what features are, in most demand from cardholders?
Yeah, I mean, I think just on the topic of financial inclusion, it's a super important one, because I think moving people from a cash-based society to a digital society and giving them access to products and services that they've never had before is incredibly important. Whether it's being able to buy things on e-commerce that were never existed before, if it's being able to have a wallet and start to be able to store value in them. All of these things are extremely important if we want parts of the world to, I guess, grow their economy, and credit is a really key part of that as well. And I think Godfrey's talk about there, even $1 or $2, those credit builder products are extremely important if we want people to be able to, small businesses to be able to borrow money to start their own business, if we want individuals to be able to afford to borrow to buy their first house, etc. It all starts from somewhere, and I think until you have those products, you can't do it. From a paymentology perspective, and I would say even more broader, an issue of processing perspective, we've seen a lot of innovation in the last 5 or 10 years around prepaid and debit, and that's understandable. But credit actually has been left untouched for 50 years, and so that means actually from a demographics perspective, the lower end of society has actually really been excluded from a credit side, and I think we want to change that. And so we've actually spent the last 2 years building a brand new credit ledger product, which we're pleased is in UAT now. It's due to go live. We've signed our first customers, and it's been built around the concept of a billing cycle, being able to calculate interest effectively, understand statements, not only across revolving credit, but as we're seeing increasing popularity around installments, because some people find that as an easier form of credit. And ultimately, it will become a full credit management platform, including those kind of microloans. We're seeing incredible demand for that at the moment, and we really hope that, especially in these developing markets that we're in, it's the first step to be able to make a real difference to end users and get them on that first step of the ladder towards financial inclusion.
Yeah. And, right now, Paymentology has Pay Credit, Visa has things like Flex Credentials. How do you see the two, Paymentology and Visa partnering up to really make sure that the end customer has access to these products? Godfrey, I'll start with you first.
We'd like to pride ourselves on what are the next generation of financial products which will serve our 15,000 banking and fintech partners. And so we developed those products, but we don't have the manpower or the tools or the local presence in all of these markets to always bring these to life ourselves. And so working with partners such as Paymentology is like at the center of how we get these innovations out across these markets. So looking to work very closely hand in hand with yourselves on products like Flex Credential and others is at the center of how we see ourselves evolving, and particularly on the credit side as well. And I think going back to Jeff's point around these micro loans, another area of a really interesting partnership.
Actually, what's interesting there when we talk about credit, because I think people have different views about credit and whether it's the right thing to provide people, because you don't want to missell credit. I think one of the, rationales that I think is core to Paymentology and is consistent with some of the conversations we've had with Visa is it's all about customer choice. We want to provide products and services with the right level of education and support that allows the customer to decide what's the right product and service for them. And when we think about the Paymentology new credit product, we have a technology called a flip technology, the Flex Credentials. Really, we want to be able to give the customer the choice of, do they want to make this specific transaction on a debit transaction? Do they want to use a prepaid card? Do they want a credit? And they should actually be able to make that decision at the point of transaction. So I think the combination of Flex Credentials and Paymentology and how we bring the technologies together is a great example of how we can just add, greater customer choice.
Yeah. I think just on that point, as the kind of birth of the Flex Credential was, we looked at these wallets, and people have a wallet and you have like a whole bunch of cards in it. And like in a digital world for digital natives, it's like, why do you need like lots of different cards? It's like, you don't need them. You just like need one credential. And if you want to say, as Jeff says, you want to do buy now, pay later, or you want to do credit, or you want to do a debit transaction, that's fine. You don't need like multiple cards for that type of transaction. So again, going back to the point of simplicity from a customer point of view.
Absolutely. It's optionality and simplicity, all baked into one credential where the customer has that flexibility to choose. And I think that really goes back to, what these digital banks are doing right. They're looking at the customer and they're saying, okay, what do you need and how do I make it easily accessible? And that's why they are so, they're doing so well. I mean, look at Weo. Fastest bank to reach profitability, right? So they're doing something right, and it really is about listening to customers and honing in on what they need.
And that ability for the customers of these modern digital banks to be able to instantly issue a virtual card to their spouse or to their children, to be able to set spend limits and controls against it, to potentially even set kind of time limits on when they can use them. Change their pins, dispute transactions. I mean, it's just a world away from the legacy providers, and it just puts the power and the control into the hand of the cardholder, which is what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. One thing I think which makes all of this possible is really looking at the roles of the regulators and how they've really become an enabler of progress. In order for you to have innovation and give customers this flexibility, you've got to have, the buy-in or the support of the regulators. So if we look at it in many markets, regulation is seen as a bit of a break. But in MENA, regulators are often playing the complete opposite role, where they're actually pushing for more digitization. They're mandating things like instant payments. They're creating the conditions for real innovation, which is something that we're not seeing everywhere else. And, it's a complete opposite. So, Godfrey, how is Visa seeing, regulators accelerating the progress across the MEA?
So firstly, a little story. Prior to joining Visa 4 years ago, I worked in the kind of advisory industry, and I actually spent a lot of time with regulators. So worked very closely with SAMA and the leadership of Saudi Arabia, and had the privilege to be, kind of contributing to the financial sector development program for 2030, as well as visionary type projects around insurance and the remittance industry, as well as in the UAE payment strategy. And it goes back to the point at the beginning. One of the things that is so exciting about the region is that you have the leadership of these countries, which have a clear vision and incredible ambition. And the regulators work hand in hand with the leadership of these countries to help facilitate that. And it's incredibly helpful to have these vision statements and documents which set the direction. And so in Visa, we have an incredibly proactive approach with regulators, not only in the CEMEA region but everywhere, because very often, who are the regulators? These are like people who have done very well in banking industry or government and been said, all right, now you're going to be responsible for payments industry and banking or something. And so you come in there and you're like, how do I do this? And you're a central bank, you've only got so many tools. And so the partnership with the private sector is so important. And so there's a real appetite across the region to look how the private sector can help deliver on some of these visions. So we're very proactive, and we go to them and say, look, our objectives are very much aligned to many of you when we talk about financial inclusion, talking about the digitization of payments, talking about accessibility to financial services, and whether it's our infrastructure, our new products, or partnership with them. We've found very fruitful discussions and opportunities to support in their broader visionary ambitions.
Yeah, and we've seen this a lot because most of the sandboxes are currently in GCC, where the regulators actually make it easy for fintechs to actually try something out. And I think that's so incredibly important because, again, that is where innovation starts. It starts with somebody saying, can I try something? And the regulator saying, yes, I will support you, rather than putting in a whole lot of barriers to enter. So it's really fantastic. Jeff, from Paymentology's perspective, what impact does regulatory clarity have on the ability of banks and fintechs to actually move fast?
Yeah, I think it's an obvious statement, but from my perspective, clearly regulators can have a huge influence on the speed at which you can innovate products and go to market. They can also have a huge negative impact if it's not clear because you're not quite sure what to do. And it's one of the single biggest, I think, drivers in terms of speed. I would concur that I think in the region, generally, regulators are proactive and are looking to work with organizations. But I think there's still more we can do. I think some of the challenges that we have are often around accessing the right person within the organization to have those conversations, because ultimately, by definition, as an organization that is trying to support disruptors, we're doing things that are new and that haven't really been thought of before. It's not that we're trying to break rules or the thing. It's just that the legislation doesn't cater for the use case which we're trying to support. And so the earlier we can have conversations, the more active we can have, I think it will make a big difference. But from a Paymentology perspective, and then for digital banks, that the clarity significantly accelerates things. So I'd actually love to understand from you offline maybe who are the right contacts in some of those, because we have some very productive conversations. We're allowed to enable clients to move very quickly, but for some things which feel quite simple sometimes, we're just not sure who to have that conversation with, and that can easily result in 3-6 months of a delay, which no one wants. It's an unintended consequence. And I understand it from the regulator's perspective because they're they're trying to manage innovation and speed with protecting, their citizens, obviously, yeah. But it has a big impact.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think when we look at it, it's so important to have that kind of direct connection with the regulator. But at the same time, it's also about saying to customers, okay, you have this great idea. Let's work with the regulator to make it happen. Oftentimes we do see, let's do something and we'll apologize later, try it out and then see what happens, which is actually quite interesting. It's something that we're seeing in the stablecoin and AI space as well, which, becomes very interesting because right now when you look at it, of course, not everything is card-based. The UAE is now one of the first countries to regulate and approve stablecoins like USDC and EURC. And on the AI side, which is really interesting, the UAE recently became the first country in the world to give all residents free access to ChatGPT Plus. I mean, that's incredible. So when we look at innovations like stablecoins and AI, Godfrey, how do you see innovations like stablecoins or AI changing the products, the visibles for the regions? But again, tying it back to regulators, how open are the regulators to trial out these new, innovations that are coming out?
I'm a big proponent of digital currencies. I'm a long-time investor in Bitcoin. The advent of stablecoins and the regulatory acceptance and promotion of these is such an important change for the industry. It's something that we are observing and exploring from a Visa perspective very proactively. In the CEMEA region, as a first step, we see that the settlement process for Visa payments can be significantly improved using digital currency, stablecoins. We have just launched the first instance of Visa settlement being conducted from a banking institution to Visa in Kyrgyzstan. So as opposed to going through the various different correspondent banking loops to complete the settlement transaction, in Kyrgyzstan, we're using USDC to do settlement. And that is a huge unlock across the Visa ecosystem because many of these banks have significant collateral requirements because the settlement time is delays, and so you have to provide collateral coverage. With stablecoins applied to that network, you can remove those requirements. So I think that's a big unlock. We're also very conscious in terms of partnering with interesting players in this space. We have an active partnership with Yellow Card, which are present across more than 20 markets across Africa. We recently invested in Honeycoin, another stablecoin provider. So we see this as super interesting. We're also an active participant in some of the industry innovations around tokenized deposits. Because you have stable coins, which are essentially, off the balance sheets of banks, but, there's a lot of deposits on banks, and applying some of the principles of blockchain technology to that deposit base with tokenized deposits and some of the BIS-led initiatives are also super interesting. And so we're kind of very keenly engaged in that. So really a space to watch and a source of really important innovation over the coming months, I think.
Absolutely. And we see lots of fintechs actually gravitating towards Visa because of the settlement in especially USDC, because you're cutting out that currency volatility, which is what really is a challenge across the whole of CEMEA. And especially when you're sending money out of CEMEA, which, to other countries, which, don't, within 7 days, you can see a lot of fluctuation. So we're seeing, especially from the fintech side, a lot of fintechs kind of asking for that. Jeff, are your clients already asking how to connect to these technologies, or is it still early days?
I think it depends which clients you talk to. I think it's a combination. I think more broadly on the macro level, I have a mixed view on this sort of stuff. I think I still do not understand the value that a meme coin or a Bitcoin, etc. has. I understand the store of value, etc., but I still don't understand where that actually has a place to play. But I also recognize that there is an undeniable trend within certain sectors of society that want to hold that as an asset class. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for businesses to make money by being involved in those. I think when you think about remittance and cross-border, businesses like Airwallex or Wise or Revolut or Remitly have done an amazing job at building these banking networks on traditional banking rails that actually can move money really, really quickly and really, really cheaply. But I do think stablecoin has a really important part to play in, especially some of the emerging markets from a 24/7 settlement perspective. But you still need to do the on-off ramps and the fiat, which can be challenging. I think the hedge of the currency volatility is a super interesting and useful use case. And at Paymentology, we have a number of clients that are in LATAM or Africa or even APAC, which are giving those citizens the opportunity to hold USDC, which is amazing benefit for them. And I think that's a super valuable. So I think I think it really depends on the use case. We are asking customers to support that, and actually, it's an area that Paymentology itself is looking at. We talked about the flex credentials and the flip between debit and credit. I think there's a real potential use case for us to be able to add stablecoin or crypto to that kind of third leg of a flex credential and allow a customer to decide whether they want to spend in crypto in real time as well. And then AI, I think, is a completely different conversation. I think we at Paymentology haven't quite gone so far into enabling everyone in the country, but we do enable everyone in our organization to have ChatGPT. And in the 6 or 7 months which we've done that, we're slowly seeing real traction in terms of how individuals are using it for both product innovation as well as operational efficiencies. And I was in a strategy meeting this morning, and we actually see some really big opportunities in 2026. No big halo moment of how we're going to change the world, but I think if we can embed the ways of working and how you can use some of the tools around AI, it can have massive impact both internally and externally for customers.
I think just on the AI point, also a really important area, and I think that one of the biggest impacts is going to be on retail commerce. We recently launched Visa Intelligent Commerce, which is a set of APIs working with AI agents who are supporting the e-commerce experience. So this idea of hunt and peck through websites and scrolling is going to soon be, and it's kind of now already being replaced by conversational commerce. But when it comes to completing the transaction, for that not just to be like, better web browsing, it needs to be integrated into the payments ecosystem. So we launched these 5 APIs, which are for these AI agents to make that payment experience as seamless as the other cards experiences. So that's a really important area for us. I think we're going to see merchants. It's got big implications for merchants. They spend a lot of money on like AdWords. These AI agents don't give a damn about AdWords, right? So that's going to change the mix of how merchants think about their own checkout experience. And I think the big thing, which we're not really talking about it so much, is when you start applying that from, where do I find the best pair of like Nike shoes or whatever, to financial services. Where do I get the best loan, the best payments related product insurance? There's a lot of margin there, which is based on customer inefficiencies, which these AI agents over time are going to have a substantial impact on.
Absolutely. 2 things. Firstly, I'm going to really need to use those controls because, you can see how that can get out of hand. But for somebody who doesn't have time to look for the best insurer, recently moved to the UK, I have no idea. This is what we're really excited about because customers need that help. They need that guidance to say, which is the best option for me for my personalized life experience. And I think that's where AI becomes so incredibly important. But at the same time, Jeff, you're right. It's about making small, deliberate changes which actually bring about operational efficiencies. So it's all about, yes, it's fantastic, but let's be cautious and, really look at how we can use it in the best ways possible. I think just touching on stablecoin, which I'm really excited about because we do see a lot of customers say, "Oh, I want to settle in USDC." Okay, why? And when you really drill down into it, it's really about creating a better experience and a safer experience for customers, which again gives them control. And if we look at the evolution of customers, one of the things that they're so focused on now is I want to have control. I want to have control of my currencies and how I'm using my money. And that's what I think is so exciting about all of these new products that are coming out. The customer is at the center of everything that we're building. right? It's just so exciting. So for both of you, and I know that we're getting to the end, but how do you think about dividing roles here? Visa exploring new capabilities, Paymentology enabling fintechs to plug them in. So, from an innovation perspective, how are you finding that you're actually able to reach customers together in a better way?
So I think it's all about being very clear and providing clarity around what role do you play in kind of this ecosystem and in this customer journey. And I think issue processing, which is kind of the area that we play in, is very niche in some ways in terms of we need to work with partners to be able to deliver the customers the end experience that they want to. And actually, within our strategy, we're very clear in terms of what's core to our proposition we want to build, and we want to own it end to end. Anything that's outside of that, actually, our stated strategy is to look at what our partners can and Visa being what are their products like, and how do we integrate and embed that into our proposition. We know there's a portfolio of services there. We know that Visa build good quality products. We also know that they are 50,000 people, which are it's quite hard to kind of navigate. And so if we can kind of provide almost like an orchestration layer over some of those services to make it easier for our customers to access those products and services, that can often be a win-win for both partners. But I think it comes down to collaboration and transparency. Actually, Flex Credentials is a great one. We have a similar product which works. One's at the network level and one's at kind of the cardholder level, which actually they both work in conjunction actually quite nicely. But we need to really talk to each other and understand what part of the problem does your product solve, and then how do we kind of iterate our kind of product to solve a different part.
Exactly, to make them complementary. And Godfrey, from your side, are you seeing the role of enablers being, like Jeff said, collaboration, or is it very much about just one to many? You want to enable as many as possible.
Our value is of a network. We're everywhere. The source of our value is building on those capabilities which serve the network and these 15,000 financial institutions that we work with, and that goes across 200 odd countries. And to enable all of the new products in all of the new financial institutions across all of those countries is a big challenge. And we can't do it ourselves. And so this is where enablers are like super important for us. And particularly when you talk about the CEMEA market, which has, from how we structure it, Central Europe, Middle East and Asia, 86 markets. And these are markets which are in very early stages of development in some areas. So working very closely with Paymentology and the enabler ecosystem is like super, super important. I think there's very clear role for ourselves, and a very clear role for yourselves. But as Jeff says, it's all about clarity, transparency, collaboration, and making sure that we like laser-like focus on what is the value that we want to bring to the end customers. But the opportunity is there for everyone.
Absolutely. That experience is key, but working together and, really creating collaboration and innovation is the building block, right?
These podcasts are good for it as well, right? We have a good rapport here, right?
So I'm so sad that this podcast is nearly over, but let's end with a quick one. So finish the sentence. The one thing I wish more fintech founders in CEMEA understood is ... Godfrey, we'll start with you.
We work with 1,600 issuers across our CEMEA region, and they're at various stages of evolution. But for us, the fintech community was so important. And about 2 years ago, we launched something called the Africa Fintech Accelerator, where we reached out to the fintechs. There's about 3,000 of them across Africa, many coming, emerging every day. Because what we were finding was you had entrepreneurs with incredible ideas, incredible energy, but just not really a very deep understanding of risk management or compliance or how to engage with a payment network. And so we've set up this program where each 6 months we mentor 20 of these fintechs to teach them about payments and help those businesses accelerate, because they're really important parts of the ecosystem. I think one of the biggest challenges across the region is one of scale, and thinking from the outset, is the segment that I'm aiming for large enough where I can achieve the right levels of economies of scale and ensure a kind of profitable, growing business. And it's tough in a market with 86 different regulators, and you need a license. And you want to get a license, it can take you a year and a half, and you have to go through all the loops of that. And so, seeing from the outset, is this a product that's in a sufficiently large market with a significantly large segment where I can really get to that scale? So, thinking about that is at the forefront is probably the number one point I would suggest.
Or join the Visa Accelerator program.
Absolutely.
Perfect. And Jeff, for you, the one thing I wish more fintech founders in CEMEA understood is.
I mentioned it a little bit right at the start around sometimes to go fast, you have to go slow. And I think it's a really fine line, because I think successful entrepreneurs and founders, they are successful because they have this laser-like focus and they want to move really, really quickly, and they get to market really quickly, and they often have first mover advantage. And you don't ever want to take that away from a founder. And that's why we're in this space. We love fintechs, we love startups, because I think it's a fast-moving industry. But I would encourage founders to sometimes, I call it being a bit more future-focused. So almost try and anticipate a little bit about what you think you need in the future, because if you think that a bit more and you then build your product to support that from day one, it means a lot less in terms of rework, finding new partners, new integrations, etc. And it doesn't need to be huge amount, because obviously that can add complexity. But I think thinking maybe through what phase 2 and phase 3 looks like, just as a concept, can have a big impact on terms of which partner you select, which regions you want to go into, what product or solution you actually build, and having some level of flexibility around that, I think can speed up your kind of successful, growth quite early on.
Absolutely. I think thinking through those phases is absolutely key, because a lot of times, and when you talk about, innovative fintechs who have really great ideas, they often don't think about the phase, or think about, okay, what am I going to do in 6 months, a year, 24 months. So that is absolutely critical. Thank you for that. And that is a wrap on this episode of the Issuer Academy. We've explored how CEMEA is becoming a proving ground for future finance, from digital bank scaling at record speed to remittances growing in real time to the first step in stablecoins and AI. A huge thank you to Godfrey and Jeff for showing true partnership between global networks and agile issuer processes, especially when we look at ambitious innovators who are entering the region. Lastly, thank you so much for joining us. This was really such an exciting conversation. I'm sad it's over, but Godfrey, thank you for joining us. Jeff, thank you for joining us. And that's a wrap on this episode of the Issuer Academy. We've explored how MENA is becoming a proving ground for the future of finance, from digital banks scaling at record speed to remittances going real time, to the first step into stablecoins and AI. A huge thank you to Godfrey and Jeff for showing how true partnership between global networks and agile next-gen neo processes can turn product evolution into real financial inclusion. Catch you next time on the Issuer Academy. That wraps up today's episode of the Issuer Academy, Paymentology's podcast to innovate, scale, and provide impact. I hope you're leaving with fresh insights and actionable strategies to help you revolutionize your card programs and drive true impact in the world. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please leave a review to help us reach more pioneers like you. Also, be sure to subscribe and follow us for more inspiring episodes and behind-the-scenes content from Paymentology. Until next time, I'm Merusha Naidu. Keep innovating, keep scaling, and keep striving to make an impact.